Okay, let's dive in. We've got this collection of sources here, articles, reports, all about the Madeleine McCann investigation. A case everyone knows, but looking at this material you've shared, it feels like we're really at a critical point right now.
That's exactly right. These sources, they really lay out some recent, quite significant developments, especially this new search. It's a case with such a long history, but the material makes it clear there are very specific pressures right now.
Right. So, our mission for this deep dive, using everything here, is to unpack what's happening now. This new search in June 2025 is incredibly timely and connect it back. Connect it to the complex history and really understand why this moment feels so significant based on what we're reading.
Yeah, it's about seeing these current events not just on their own, but as the latest chapter. It highlights the persistence, sure, but also the real urgencies driving investigators today. These documents really spell that out.
Okay, so let's get straight into what the sources say is happening literally today, June 3rd, 2025. It sounds like the German investigation has kicked into a new gear, an urgent phase.
Yes, the material you sent points to a what they're calling a credible tip-off. That seems to be the catalyst. And the focus is very specific. Trenches near an old cottage and the land around it in Praia da Luz.
And that cottage is important because, according to these sources, the main suspect, Christian Brueckner, used to frequent it. So this isn't just a random dig. It's highly targeted based on new info linked to him.
Exactly. And what's interesting and detailed here is the tech they're using, ground-penetrating radar is mentioned, specific digging teams. It's quite an operation. The sources also clarify the jurisdiction. It's German police leading with a German warrant, but obviously working with the Portuguese authorities there.
And it notes British police aren't directly involved in the search, but they're watching closely, which just underscores, how international this whole thing is. Portugal, Germany, UK, it's all laid out in these sources.
Which brings us to, well, the big question these sources tackle. Why the continued intense focus on Christian Brueckner? The documents are clear. He's 48, German, and already serving time for unrelated, very serious convictions, rape and child abuse.
And he was officially made a suspect, an arguido, that's the Portuguese term, the sources explain, which is a necessary step in Madeleine's disappearance back in 2022. Important to say, though, he hasn't actually been charged in this case yet. The material alleges he was in Praia da Luz around May 2007 when she vanished.
And connecting that to the bigger picture in these sources, one of the really pressing things is this concern he could be released from prison for his other crimes, maybe as early as September 2025.
Wow, September 2025.
Yeah, that date comes up again and again in the sources because it just adds this huge layer of urgency. They need to find any potential forensic evidence linking him to Madeleine before that legal clock potentially runs out.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Based on the sources, the reason for this specific search now is that new lead. We don't know the details from the material, obviously, but it was apparently strong enough to make them go back to places linked to Brueckner, but with a really specific target this time.
Focusing on those trenches in that cottage seems like a definite shift. It feels more targeted than, say, the big search they did at the Array Dam back in 2023. That was, 30 miles away. And the sources say they found some stuff, but nothing definitively linked to Madeleine back then.
Okay, so to really get the weight of this current search, like these sources help us do, we probably need to quickly touch on the history. It's just such a complex backdrop. Madeleine disappeared May 3rd, 2007, nearly 4 years old, from the holiday apartment in Praia da Luz.
Yeah, parents dining nearby, checking on the kids in the unlocked apartment. Her mother, Kate, found her missing around 10 p.m.
And what the sources you gave us really emphasize from back then is, well, the acknowledgement of mistakes, critical errors by the Portuguese police right at the start.
Yes. Specifically, failing to secure the crime scene, properly potential contamination, and no immediate roadblocks or border alerts. The sources are pretty blunt. This severely hampered collecting forensic evidence from day one.
Which is crucial because the sources connect that directly to the years of speculation and, frankly, the mess that followed. The material also reminds us about Robert Murat, the British guy living nearby. He was cleared quickly.
Right. And briefly, even Kate and Jerry McCann themselves were suspects, based on some, controversial DNA and dog alerts. But the sources confirmed they were formally cleared in 2008. That theory is widely discredited in this material, though it did hang around in some media, unfortunately.
Then Scotland Yard got heavily involved. Operation Grange from 2011, massive resources poured in.
Huge. The sources mention over $13 million spent. but ultimately no arrests in that phase, despite looking at loads of people.
Brueckner only really emerged as the prime suspect much later, around 2020. The sources detail why. His history of sex offenses against children, the fact he was known to be in Praia de Luz with that distinctive camper van back then.
And crucially, those phone records. According to the sources, they place his mobile phone very close to the McCann's apartment on the night Madeleine disappeared, May 3rd, 2007.
There are also those really disturbing allegations mentioned in the sources, him supposedly bragging about knowing what happened, reports of photos or videos found on hard drives buried near a place he rented. It's important, though, the sources also state he consistently denies any involvement.
Absolutely. He denies it.
So fast forward, German prosecutors say in 2020 they assume Madeleine is dead and name Brueckner as their main suspect. Then, like we said, he becomes an arguido in Portugal in 2022, a step the sources explain was timed just before the statute of limitations on some potential charges might have run out.
Right, a procedural necessity.
Yeah.
And then came the 2023 array dam search. Materials found, yes, but the sources confirm nothing conclusive linking him or Madeleine turned up there.
Which brings us right back here, June 2025, this very specific search and that critical time pressure the sources keep highlighting. Brueckner's current prison sentence. It's nearing its end, according to these documents.
It's potentially September 2025, and the sources are very clear about what that means. Without stronger evidence, forensic or maybe witness testimony, directly linking him to Madeleine's disappearance, charging him specifically for this case, it could become much harder, maybe impossible, after that date.
It's stark.
Yeah. And the human side is there, too, in the sources. The family's statement from May 2025, the 17th anniversary mark. They talk about the enduring pain. Madeleine's absence still aches. We live in limbo, but we haven't lost hope. They're still committed, the sources say, to finding answers.
So what's next, according to these sources, really hinges on this current search, doesn't it? They suggest this might actually be the last major targeted push before his possible release.
It feels that way reading this. If they find significant forensic evidence now, it could potentially finally lead to charges against Brueckner for Madeleine. If not, well, the legal paths available might narrow considerably. The sources make that pretty plain.
And we can't ignore, based on these sources, the massive public and media impact. It's almost unparalleled.
Oh, completely. The documents note it's possibly the most heavily reported missing child case ever. Documentaries, theories, this global frenzy.
Yeah.
And some sources suggest that arguably created its own challenges for the investigation at times.
Right. Okay, so let's try and pull the main threads together from all these sources you shared. We've got this urgent, very targeted search happening right now, June 3rd, 2025. Near that specific cottage, those trenches in Praia de Luz, it's driven by a new lead.
And it's focused squarely on Christian Brueckner. He's been the main suspect for years, as the sources confirm. But there's this looming legal deadline, his potential prison release in September 2025.
And we've connected this moment back to the difficult history. Those initial investigation errors, the previous big searches, understanding how that path led to today's search.
Exactly. And what's at stake, reading between the lines of these sources, is just incredibly high. This current search really could be the final big push to find that crucial forensic link to Madeleine. Finding it could be the key to potential charges against Brueckner. Not finding it, well, the sources suggest that could significantly limit the legal options going forward.
Yeah, putting the history together with these current urgent events really shows you the sheer depth and complexity. It demonstrates why you need the whole picture from those first days and the early challenges, right up to this critical search today, to really grasp where things stand.
It absolutely does. And looking at that whole timeline laid out here, those widely reported initial errors, the intense, prolonged media focus over so many years.
It definitely leaves you thinking about how these incredibly complex, long investigations actually play out in the real world.
Absolutely. So maybe here's a final thought for you, the listener, to consider drawing directly from the picture these sources paint. Given those initial investigation errors we discussed and that massive media impact over the years, how might those factors have actually shaped the way this case developed? And what does that suggest about the inherent difficulties in these complex, long-running investigations, especially when they're under such intense public scrutiny?
It's certainly something worth considering as this search unfolds and we see what happens next.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the source material.